Title of the presentation is State of Handwriting Education in Region that Use the Latin Script. Pooja Saxena. May I call Pooja Saxena on board soon? Pooja Saxena is a senior designer and a project manager, Typetogether, Czech Republic, Europe.
Thank you, Professor Shisagar. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and thank you again, Professor Shisagar, for introducing me and to Typo Day for having me for this talk. My name, like Professor Shisagar said, is Pooja Saxena, and I work at Typetogether, which is an award-winning independent type foundry which develops typefaces for world scripts. So, yeah, that's me. The foundry was started about 16 years ago by Veronica Burian and Jose Scaglione, who met at the Type Design graduate program at the University of Reading. And since then, the foundry is developed into, about a dozen and a half or so team members that you see in this picture. And while the foundry obviously develops a lot of typefaces for retail as well as for custom clients, it's always found research to be a really important aspect of its functioning. And I'm here to talk about one of those research projects. So in early 2022, that is this year, a small research team at Typetogether set out to start studying how handwriting is taught to school children around the world. Our focus was largely on the Latin script. And what we are trying to attempt here is to study how handwriting is taught in about 40 countries around the world. And our goal is to create a one-of-a-kind, unprecedented, publicly available, free resource about handwriting teaching, which we hope will be useful for typographic communities, as well as educators and teachers around the world. What I'll be sharing with you today is a really kind of whirlwind tour of what we've learned. We're about at the halfway point of our research, about 6 to 7 months in. And yeah, this will be a little snapshot of the questions we've been asking and what are the different kinds of answers that we've got from around the world. Now, even before I delve into the research and our analysis, there are a couple of things I want to highlight. So the first is that we are obviously not pioneers in the field, and we are building on the work of existing giants. One of them, of course, is Rosemary Sassoon, who was also obviously invited to be a keynote speaker here at Typo Day, but also others like Florian Hardwick, who studied handwriting models around the world. The other thing that I want to highlight is that our work is largely primary research driven. What this means is that a lot of what I will be sharing with you and what we will put out eventually is data and information that we have collected directly, rather than depending on the work of our peers and of other researchers. So in doing so, we've looked at a number of documents. And most importantly, we've conducted a lot of interviews with teachers, with designers, administrators, others involved in education, to get a really comprehensive view of how handwriting is taught around the world. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is to talk about some of the questions we've been asking and give you the answers that we've received from different parts of the world, just to highlight how diverse handwriting education around the world can be. So one of the first questions that we asked was a really basic one, which is how is handwriting taught? So we see a few different methods highlighted around the world. The first method involves that students are first taught print script letters, which are simple ball and stick style letters, which are then followed by cursive writing. So this method, for example, is followed in the method Dumont, which is used in France. In a number of other countries, we see that this method of teaching children two styles of letters has fallen out of use. And instead, what we see is a progressive approach. What this means is that students first learn unjoined letters in the first stage. In the second stage, they learn letters which have exit strokes. And in the third stage, they learn how to kind of join these letters. So what you see on your screens right now is an example of that, which is the work of Scottish calligrapher Tom Gordy. So if you look at the first spread on this, you see examples of how, he's telling you how letters become joined. So if you look at the dotted bit of the F or the dotted bit in the S, they eventually tell students how to join letters, which you see in the second spread here. The work of Tom Gordy has actually become quite relevant even in the modern world because it is used as the basis of the most popular handwriting models that are used today in Australia. Another curious approach that we saw in handwriting education is from Cuba, where students not only learn two distinct styles of letters for reading and for writing, but also within handwriting, their education gets divided into two parts. So first, they learn writing, so which is the book that you see on the left, Escritura, which is the first stage of learning how to write, which focuses on literacy. And then the second one is calligraphia, which is about presentation and which is about having really good handwriting. The next question we ask, and one which is often, one which often causes a lot of outrage is, about cursive writing. Is it compulsory in schools? Is it dying? Will students no longer know how to read it? And here too, we find a lot of different answers. Most countries that we've studied, there don't seem to be any clear recommendations about how cursive writing is compulsory or is not compulsory. Instead, curriculum documents and syllabus tend to say that children must have fluent handwriting by a certain age, and what kind of handwriting that may be is left open for interpretation. We also see that there is a lot of variation in the age by which students are expected to learn how to write. So, for example, we learned that in Australia, that age is about 12 to 13 years, which is, at least we thought was a little bit late. Whereas in New Zealand, it is 7 to 8 years. So even though these are neighboring countries, there's a difference of half a decade in, when students are expected to have fluent handwriting. So coming back to the question of, is it compulsory? We see that in some countries like Canada, it is compulsory in about 7 provinces, I think, whereas in 3 others, it's not compulsory. We also see the kind of unique example of Finland, which has done away with cursive writing altogether. So in 2016, they adopted a new curriculum that was published 2 years prior. And this curriculum only recommends a style of unjoined writing. And this kind of formally ends the teaching of cursive joined handwriting in Finland, even though the curriculum says that if students end up joining letters organically because their handwriting has become fluent, that is acceptable. We also find that there are, prescribed models in some countries, which is quite unique. So we see that in France, for example, in 2013, the government introduced these 2 handwriting models called Écriture A and B, which provided a model for teachers to use. So these were available as, freely available typefaces. The interesting thing that happened there, of course, was that despite the backing of the government and despite it being much simpler than what teachers had been using before, it didn't gain a lot of popularity. The more interesting things we've been seeing are in countries where there are no, prescribed models. So one example of that we see in Mexico, where the curriculum does not make cursive writing compulsory, nor does it provide any specific model that teachers must use when they're teaching handwriting. And yet we see that cursive writing, which is locally known as letra manuscrita, continues to be quite popular. And it remains popular on the basis of tradition and on the basis of using samples from books that were published over 50 years ago. So what you see here is an example of a book published by the Mexican National Commission of Free Textbooks. And they published some books between the late 1950s and early 70s. And so as I'm saying, that these are pretty old, and now the curriculum doesn't require anything of that sort. And yet in our interviews with local Mexican designers, we learned that as of today, when educational publishers are looking to produce new typefaces for handwriting education for students, they tend to hire type designers, but also provide them with a sample of handwriting that their typefaces must reproduce, right? So often these handwriting samples have been done by teachers who are depending on the samples that you see on the left, right? Some version of those samples. And by virtue of different people writing this, there are small peculiarities that get introduced every time, and they then get formalized through these new typefaces that are now being used for handwriting education. So The example you see on the right is a typeface that is just a few years old. It came out in 2019. And while it is clearly very, very simple to the sample on the left, it already has small differences, such as the fact that the descenders in this are not as deep as the original sample. Here is another example of a typeface that has been produced recently in Mexico. Again, you can see it is extremely similar to the sample. For example, the unique kind of F you see, which is, very, very peculiar, or the uppercase Q. But you also see a difference, which is if you look at the lowercase p here, it doesn't have a loop in the descender, which all the other letters have. And so does the, original kind of sample that came out in the mid 20th century. Where we see that there are no where there are no prescribed handwriting models, we usually tend to ask the question, what are popular handwriting workbooks or textbooks in a particular country? Because they might give us a clue about what students might be learning with. So take the example of India, where the curriculum does not have any specification for cursive writing in English, but books produced by the NCERT, which is the National Council of Educational Research and Technology, do show joint cursive writing. Now, this becomes important because even though the NCERT's recommendation themselves are not binding across the country, we see that about 19 different state and national school systems across 14 different states in the country do either adopt or adapt the NCERT textbooks. So there's a good chance that students across the country that are learning English may be learning handwriting of this style. In looking at textbooks produced around the world, we see a very interesting case study in Colombia, where handwriting workbooks called cartillas have been really popular for about a century. The first one that I'm showing you here is from 1918. And the kind of combination of letters used for teaching that started back then in 1918 has continued over the years. So students tend to be shown letters which are ball and stick geometric style, which you see here on the top. And along with that, they also learn these cursive letters. And you see these three books, the last of which is from 1985. And you see that this approach to which letters to show to children, continues. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also speak a little bit about the different styles of cursive writing that we've observed. And, through our analysis, what are the different visual and historical threads that we've found? So without going into too much detail, I want to trace a couple of these connections with you. One of the starting points that we found is very, very important when we think of handwriting education is English roundhand, which is a handwriting and calligraphy style that developed in England in the middle of the 17th century. Now, one of the styles of calligraphy that became very closely associated with roundhand was copperplate, and it became very widespread in the 17th and 18th centuries, not just in England, but also across the Europe and even across the Atlantic in the United States. Now, in the United States, copperplate gave way to Spencerian script, which kind of remained popular right until the beginning of the 20th century. At this point, it got overtaken by the work of Austin Palmer, who introduced the Palmer method, which you see here. And the Palmer method has remained extremely relevant to handwriting education, even though it has lost steam when it comes to a way of business communication or writing in every day. So what I'm showing you here are typefaces that, used not just in the US, but a number of neighboring countries of the US, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, Cuba, where also letters based on the Palmer method are used to teach children handwriting even today. The other kind of thread that Spencerian handwriting led to was the vertical cursive. So in parts of Northern Europe, there was an impetus to improve these extremely slanted cursive writing to something vertical, which was believed to be more hygienic. It was believed to improve the posture of students. And these styles start from there. They become really popular in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, and France. And from there, they also end up traveling to their colonies in Latin America, so Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, Argentina, and in the case also of Vietnam, which was occupied by France more recently. The other kind of starting point that I want to bring your attention to is the Chancery script of of italics by Italian masters like Arrighi. Here I show a sample from L'Operina. And this style develops in the 16th century, but has continued to be relevant to handwriting education even today. First, we see the beginnings of that from the Italic handwriting revival movement in the early 20th century in England, which then kind of lays the foundation of several approaches to handwriting education that have become really popular. So among them, Nelson handwriting, the work of Jarman, Marion Richardson, also Rosemary Sassoon and Williams, and Tom Gordy style, which I showed you earlier, which has become popular in Australia. This style has also really influenced handwriting education in Iceland. These are letter forms from a book called Italioscript, which is a textbook by Gunlagessi Briam, and they're also based on Renaissance Italic Chancery styles directly from what Arrighi had drawn in the 16th century. So that is all the information I want to share with you. Before I wrap up, I just want to tell you that at Type Together, we are on the lookout for experts and enthusiasts in the field of handwriting and education. And so if you're a teacher, an educator, a designer who thinks you can help us understand handwriting education, especially in India, please get in touch with me and we would like to set up an interview with you. And, our work would not be possible without everyone who's agreed to contribute to this research, apart from our small research team at Type Together. So I want to thank everyone who's contributed so far. And thank you, all of you, for being a very, very great audience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pooja, for your presentation, and you initiated definitely a few things. I will go to everybody now and I will ask a question. Before that, I have certain questions with, I've written it down here, visual cryptography, in typography. And Nushil, what was an inspiration behind the project? That's my question. And is it applicable? How it is applicable in real society?
So yeah, like I mentioned in the presentation, the inspiration was generally patterns in a normal sense, which we see every day around. My main focus was to create something which sits in plain sight and goes unnoticed, but only when you observe enough, or the observant ones can figure out. In a conventional ways, we have always tried to create typography in a way so that everyone can read it quickly and it's easy and it's legible. I just wanted to take a completely opposite approach. And as for the real world applications, like I said, the applications again wouldn't be some conventional applications. They can be used to specific purposes, like I said, suiting to a certain aesthetic, like some murals or in print or media. So basically these are just these are display fonts, but they have a certain quirk to it, and if we find a proper function to it, we can, as I gave an example, we can bridge the physical and digital world, because the fonts are broken into parts, and that gives us that flexibility to do so. Also, one more example I gave was that I'm currently in the process of creating a tile, actual cement tile out of it, so that it can be used in the architectural world. So that's one more way type gets out into the physical world.
Thanks, Anushil. And now I'll finish some of the questions and the queries, or maybe suggestions to you all first, and then we will open it to the participants. Yeah. So my next question to Anaka. It's a great way to introduce the Indian craft and heritage. Yeah? What will be the application possibilities? Can you express it in quickly on
Yeah,
this?
we have already launched our product, and schools have across India started buying it for the kindergarten. So it's already been applied in their learning now. So from schools in Jaipur to somebody in Tirunelveli, they have actually bought our products and they're using it in their school teaching methodology. And we have got feedbacks from the teachers of how it's helped them in visualizing the form much easier, and they are remembering the alphabets much easier, and then it's helping them in their writing. So it's already now in market, and people can buy the product as.
Oh, wonderful. I'll finish my question first. I suppose audience will allow me to do so as a chairperson, and then I see some of the chat box here and specific questions. You also can uh, refer to that and be ready to answer them. Yeah. My next question to Julie Karhadkar. Yeah. Julie, have you found anything in IndiScript context? Yeah.
So that is the gap that I found, that the kind of references that I was finding in the Latin script, I was not, there is nothing closer to that. And I feel that the gap can be bridged with visual prosody, or, drawing from Sam Winston's work and so on. I really
Let's suggest, if I'm allowed to, like you can, in Maharashtra, there is Dasopant Pasodi, which is known as Chitrakavya. So it's about the concrete poetry of Mallarmé or Apollinaire, if you are aware about the rain,
Yes.
all those poems. Similar to that, I will not say same, maybe the intentions, maybe with the different intentions, but Dasopanta's Pasodi in Python, if you found in Maharashtra, they are also doing, like we can say pictograms or, kind of poetry through letter forms and the layout and the whole arrangement of the letter itself without adding any additional visual element. Even RK did a lot of experiment. If you are aware, if you're not aware, you're most welcome. I can offer you the concrete poetry.
Definitely, sir. It will be really nice.
Experiment on the basis of the Dasopant and Mallarmé and all these authors. RK was inspired by, and he used to openly say those references that he's inspired by that. And I have some of the references. If you want to continue studying in that area,
definitely, sir. I would really appreciate that.
So next is Pooja. Yeah, Pooja, your subject is so much of close to my PhD. So it's a very first of all, congratulations for dealing with such a subject. I have certain suggestions, Pooja, for you, that you also can refer to, like, many of the Freeman and Dougherty. There is a big body of research done, conducted in America, Pooja, about 30 years. And you'll find, if you have a subscription of JSTORs, I'm coming straight to the point, and Chicago publications, yeah, the Freeman and Dougherty and Osco and Dobie, and all these people have really worked hard for a long time, for about 30 years, till 1981 to be precise. And they have really done many issues related to handwriting research. And then there is one more thing, which is a Google publication now with the rare books like Theory of Handwriting, by Jackson J, the Theory and Practice of Handwriting, published by New York all the way, but still very old calligrapher, 18th century, end of the 18th century, from Germany, not from France, frankly, So these are the people where my inspiration, if you get to see their work, nothing like it, you feel free to ask me, and I'll happily send you and share.
But I'll be sure to get in touch with you to get some book recommendations, and if you're available, maybe set up an interview with you as well.
At the same time, the share after the Daniel and Bright, the share has explicitly worked together with the Sonali now, and came out with separate definitions and terminology for Indian script culture. So it's wonderful to understand these people through their papers, which are already published. And I, the third on, handwriting in America, the cultural history, altogether a different perspective,
Absolutely.
Thorndon's DP, I've really listed down my refer again, my because no one by hearted this name, but 1957, this guy has written a handwriting history in America and the cultural history specifically. It's a different dimension. We'd love to see rather than the mannerism and methods, the cultural history of America. It's wonderful to know that they were a different hand altogether. We were aware about the the classic Spencerian hand and Palmer's hand and all that. But apart from that, he covers the history for. There was a different style for the women's, and there was a different style for a men's. So it's worth it. It opens up to different disciplinary issues which we are unaware about. So, Pooja Saxena, congratulations for dealing with such a complicated and meticulous and the rare subject you are in which. Yeah, I'm happy, and I suppose this recording will help you later on if you are not taking notes and open to public. Thank you very much, Pooja, and thank you everybody. And I open to the public conversation without wasting my time. Yeah, thanks.
I have a few observations, especially to you, Pooja. Nice presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And very relevant work. Okay, and I think looking across countries is such a great idea. I'm not sure whether you'll find commonalities. Okay, so Pooja, looking at it across different nations is a great idea. Not very sure you'll find a solution which kind of fits everybody. Yeah, but maybe it has different connotations. Of course, our own issue is very different. It's multilingual, so many languages. And interestingly, the new education policy, which we're all trying to follow, says that preschool children will not have any textbooks. Okay, they just learn through play and learn. So we have to look at the aspect of even learning letter forms in an entirely different manner now. Okay.
Very valid point, sir. And I think part of what we're trying to do is not really come up with a universal solution, but also just really understand, learn, and appreciate the diversity of what handwriting means across the world. Because so much conversation about it is just polemic, right? Like handwriting is dying, children don't have good handwriting, but it doesn't really go into the fact that it doesn't even mean the same thing everywhere. And the contexts everywhere might be quite different. And you're very valid in bringing up like the NEP, because if there are going to be textbooks, then it is going to be very different. And that may be very different from our neighboring countries or another country in Asia, which has a more textbook driven approach to education. And I think more than one way can be appropriate.
Yes, of course.
And I think that's nice to kind of study it.
I'm sure textbook will still remain because India is so diverse, right? Everybody would do it differently.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely your research will have, I think, very nice implications. Okay.
We hope so.
Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, so that's for you. I mean, I wanted to comment on Kanaka's initiative. It's such a nice, beautiful initiative, taking inspirations from our own culture and doing something which fits into the theories of constructive education, right? Where you put in things which you can build multiple alternatives through it. So that's a great learning. At the essence of it, there is something which is part of your culture, but at the same time you can use it for typeface or building something else or creating something else out of it. I mean, there are endless possibilities of it. And I think, we wish you, all the best, for that initiative,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And it means a lot because I've met you when I was a student, and now, interacting with you after so many years. I think the first Design for Children, I was just a student studying toy design, and now, running my own brand. And seeing you here on Typo Day, it's like a full circle complete.
Sure. I think it's a great initiative. Please go ahead. Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
so that's really very nice. I think all the presentations were good. Also Anushil, I think it's really nice. No, you fit in very nicely into the aspect of experimenting and exploring and researching and digging deeper. You know, it's a great I mean it's a great exercise also for students. You're trying to create something, and only after creating can you actually see its implications. Of course, illusions and yeah, all of them fit into that, because you can't visualize it. It's only after you try it out it kind of fits in the puzzle. So again, very nice project.
Thank you, sir.
And
Means a lot.
yeah, so that's really a nice project. Yeah, and also Jewish project. It's again, it's a subject which is very dear to all of us. How do you visualize anything? For us, all elements of design are important in this. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
and the play of how do you actually add images to text or make the text itself into an image. Yeah, endless possibilities. Yeah, and I think I think what Santosh said is very true also. There are very nice examples from our own context which probably you've missed. Maybe you need to put in that.
Definitely. I will.
Yeah,
I will.
people.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and yeah, starting from Satyajit Ray, if you look at it,
Yes.
a lot of his, poems, especially for children, are visual, and it's very subtly visual. It's not
Yes.
images and text, but the text becomes images.
Image.
Yeah,
Yes.
so there are many nice examples, and a lot of calligraphers have worked in this,
Right. Right.
which are again a transition between image and text. So maybe these are also probably fit into your area of work.
Definitely.
There are also a couple of doctorates which I've done. One was done at IIT Bombay
Mhm.
on this subject itself. So maybe you can, look at that as a reference.
Definitely. Definitely, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
that's it from me. Yeah.
I cannot resist myself to at least give some suggestions to Joey about the concrete poetry and visual poetry. Is my delight of the subject. And in IIT Powai, Apurva Joshi, Professor Joshi's daughter, did a separate PhD on visual poetry and all that. If you can get a thesis, I didn't got a copy yet, but you can search in IIT library, maybe on your level, and can go further in. And
Sure.
I myself love so much that I've created some of the couple of book covers on the concrete poetry basis, but we do not have any critic to do that. All those book covers get the awards, but people don't understand in India because the language is still not well versed with the people who give awards.
Right.
To give it a different is because it's different cover. They give awards, but they really cannot appreciate in a methodical fashion. Anyway, so you can do that role. You have a scope there. I look at it positively. Yeah. So
Thank
all this that, and without signing off from here, Pooja, Dr. Bhagwat's analysis available very much in the B.S. Naik's book, Typography of Devanagari. Generally, we don't see annexures. Yeah, that's a problem of the scholars. They read books, but they do not see references or bibliography of the books. And if you see Dr. Bhagwat's analysis of handwriting, it's actually very adverse. He is trying to plead the case of the Roman script, how easy it is as compared to Devanagari. Yeah, and I love that because the attempt what he has made is very rigorous and very researchers and scientific. But that opens up our eyes and tells Mr. Bhagwat, moreover, rather than tell Mr. Bhagwat who is no more, but it works as an milestone for us to have a clarity of thinking in analysis of handwriting and different handwriting cultures which are script specific. So Pooja, do read Dr. Bhagwat's analysis in
Absolutely.
Dr. B.S. Naik's book in Typography of Devanagari. Yeah, and there are graphologist methods. You might have not gone through it. The graphology is not considered as a science; it is considered as a practice. But the way they analyze and the way the methods helps us analyze scientifically, which has inspired me. So You also can take help of graphologist methods of analysis. And I really don't remember the name, but maybe Jackson, it's a sad name, has just come out from Jackson J from the Theory of Practice and Handwriting, the very oldest book available in Germany, who dissected first the kind of, and he is so interdisciplinary. He related that with the embroidery and with the loops, the stitches which are in the loops and kind of, so running hands, he compared the beats of the stitching, and it's just wonderful, So it's Google has supported that as an old document and free of charge available to everybody.
I'll make sure I look at
Go
it.
through that Jackson J's book of Theory of Practice of Handwriting. Yeah, that's all I have to say. And do not forget the share and Daniel's comment, which is a very recent with Sonali Nag. I'm very proud to say that Sonali Nag works with
Sonali Nag, right, sir?
Sonali Nag with share. Yeah, which share has finally came out with one more terminology called Akshara script, rather than the Abhiguda and all those terminologies which are the script system grammatologist has made. So I am really proud of Sonali Nagar. At least I did one more terminology called Akshara script, and she said that this is different than anything in the world. And when such scientists categorize it, it really boosts our level of confidence to go further in the research inquiry. So thank you all, and congratulated to you, Kanika, Jui, and Anushil. Wonderful presentations, and great. It was delighted to listen to you all, and 2 minutes further than that. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
So thank you all panel members for their wonderful presentations. And thank you, Professor Santosh, for chairing this session and all the feedback that you gave.